Before we get going, I mean, it's a long title to this panel, and I just thought I'd say a few words about it. Most of you who are here can probably remember a date. It might be November 7th, 1989. It might possibly be 25th or 26th of December 1991, when the generation that had worried about things like a nuclear exchange just took this collective sigh of relief, and the Cold War was over. And we called it the post-Cold War period. We knew we were in it. We traded more. We traveled everywhere. Personally, I loaded up 300, the biggest truck I could legally drive, and with office furniture, and drove over to Vilnius, Lithuania, and set up an office there. So that was a period that we can debate how long it lasted, and I think Maria and Pekka here have different perspectives on that question. We'll come back to it. But somewhere between back then and today, the post-Cold War period ended. And whether we think of it as a situation today where the West is in conflict with Russia, or we can think perhaps bigger geopolitical blocks around it as well in the longer term, we're definitely in a different paradigm for how to think about a lot of questions we have taken for granted over the last 30 years. So this panel sort of put together to try to examine questions we might have to think differently about in the light of innovations, practical innovations that are being developed and deployed as we speak. And we've focused in on 4 different areas. First one, and we're going to have Jarand speak about that in a second, is energy. How do we create energy independence for Europe in the short and long term? Second one is information integrity and information security. How do we believe what we believe? How can we trust what we read? And Maria is here to talk about that. Third is cybersecurity. How can we secure not only our physical infrastructure, but the digital one that we've become so reliant on? And then finally, Pekka is going to talk a little bit about food security. And also we're going to talk a little bit about the personal experiences of both Maria and Pekka, who perhaps could be thought of as the first person to leave Russia and the last. And that cryptic statement will gain meaning in the next 45 minutes. But first of all, I hope I have Jarand with me, and I actually have to turn around to see you, Jarand. And
I'm here.
Yeah, there you are.
I'm here.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent, super.
I'm here too.
Mårten, I hope you're feeling okay.
I'm good. I tested negative for COVID this morning, so I'm in great shape. I'm just not allowed to fly to Seattle, so sorry I can't be there, but everything else is good.
All right, fantastic. So without further ado, Jarand, you are, one might argue, at least one of the experts that get asked most often in matters of energy supply and security. We met many years ago, but when we started talking about your business today, you had a little Excel spreadsheet with data about most of the subsoil resources on the Eastern Hemisphere at that point, I think. And you founded a business based on that Excel sheet that's called Rystad Energy. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then we can get to the perspective on energy independence.
Yeah, thank you, Birger. You were actually the first one that's really educated me about the oil and gas business when we worked together on the first project in McKinsey many years ago. But after being in McKinsey for many years, working on a lot of these big mergers, etc., I was not really content with the energy information and tried to convince them to set up a business to have basically build a complete description, a digital twin of the energy landscape. But they thought that was completely unrealistic. But I really had this idea. So in 2004, I founded this company. We got all oil and gas fields globally into this, but I called the company Rystad Energy because I knew that over time, oil and gas would not be the key thing. It would be new energy forms. And here we are today. Over the last 5 years, we have really been building up, including all solar assets, wind assets, battery plants, hydrogen, electrolyzers, etc. Basically every single asset that is producing or consuming energy in this digital twin of the energy world. So here we are today with 480 employees and 25 offices globally.
Fantastic. Let's see if I can, I'll be your personal clicker for today, Jarand, so see if I can advance your slides here.
Good.
Is it working?
So let's then get into the energy situation in Europe and connect them to the energy situation. So I think this is at least not the presentation I've made, but maybe if you get that.
That's actually the next one. So can we find the...
So starting with the blue slides with Russia on it. But
this is number 2.
Nevertheless, I can start to talk a little bit. There we are, there we are. Perfectly. So let's go to the next slide. And here we really see the issue for Europe. What you see here is that the green bar is the energy production. The red bar is the energy consumption. And then the orange bar is then the balance. And in Europe, there are 2 net energy exporters. Well, Belarus and Albania doesn't really count. So it's Russia and Norway. And we have a lot of surplus energy. And every other country in Europe are energy importers. And they are importing up to 74%, or 81% even from Greece, of the energy they need. So they are depending on other nations. And they are primarily depending on Russia. So, and if you stop the energy over a night, you will also stop all the activity in a society. So we are really dependent on that energy. So concretely, Russia supplies 35% of the oil that Europe is needing, 30% of the gas, and also about 35% of the coal. And usually coal used to be the mean of energy security for every nation because that they had locally. And they were importing gas and they were importing oil. Just to jump to one conclusion, renewables will be the new coal in terms of energy security because renewables is also domestic. But in this situation with Ukraine, of course, we need to put on the foot, not accept to import energy from an aggressor like Russia, and we need to, as fast as possible, get independent. It's easier to get independent on the oil side because that is a global traded market, and most of this oil is, in double sense, a liquid. So you can move it around on the oceans. But the methane molecules are transported by pipelines, and it's much more integrated in the infrastructure. So it's not easy to get to change that energy system very fast. So let's then move to the next slide. And then you will see basically all the gas imported to Europe. The red part here is the gas from Russia. It's about 30%, as I said. And you see the mix in each country, and you see the breadth of it is basically the total. So, for example, Germany is 90 BCM, is the biggest part here. So you see the biggest is Germany, number 2 is Italy, and then there's a lot of smaller countries. And we want to get independent of Russia. We want to stop all of this energy, but what will happen? And what has already happened? Well, let me start to click one forward just on the animation. Then you will see that 5 countries has already stopped importing. If you click one forward, you will see that, yes, that 5 countries has already stopped importing or being cut off from Russian gas. Poland is the most important, but the Baltic countries and Bulgaria. If you click more forward, we will see that another 3 countries has promised to get rid of all the Russian gas by the end of this year. If you click forward one more time, we will see that the 2 most important countries, Italy and Germany, they have committed to get rid of Russian gas by 2024 and 2025, respectively. And this will be extremely hard. They have to use all kinds of innovations and all kinds of new sources to get there. So, but if you click one forward, we will see that this is about 65% of all the energy imported from Russia to Europe. So let's click one more forward. Then I was challenged by Birger, what if we really have to cut 100% of the gas by the end of 2022? How bad would it be for Europe? So meaning then from the 1st of January 2023, no Russian gas looking forward. Well, then we have to do two things. We have to find alternative sources of gas, and we have to reduce demand for gas. And we have looked into this in detail, and the short story is that it is possible, but it will be extremely painful. It will hurt, especially for Germany and Italy. But the new sources will be that we are fully utilizing the LNG terminals, we are building new LNG receiving terminals, we are reopening fields in in UK and Norway, and we have a gigantic field in Netherlands, Groningen field, that only 9 years ago produced 60 BCM. Last year, 6 BCM, because they have subsidence, so the city above it is actually falling a little bit, and they have a lot of problems with basements have fractures, etc. So the city council has said, no more gas production, we are destroying the buildings. I think this can be a wild card in this to get rid of Russian gas. We must accept more problems in the basements of those small societies. We must give them a lot of compensation and let them live in this situation for another 2 to 3 years. Then we actually might be able to be innovative and be independent there of Russian gas. But we also have to reduce demand for gas, and the chemical production and pulp and paper production to basically stop that and rather import chemicals and pulp and paper could be the way. But 330,000 Germans are engaged in the chemical industry, and we expect that these people will not be able to work then for a year or two, and the German economy is likely to go into recession. So this is a very high price to pay for short-term energy independence. But longer-term energy independence, I think, is actually quite realistic, and we are already started on this track. Here, again, we have to use all the tools we have in the energy transition toolbox, which is solar panels, rooftop, utility scale. It is heat pumps, replace the gas heater with heat pumps, with rooftop hot water, etc. Just, I was also asked, what is the implications for Russia on their economy? So let's then move another slide forward again. We will then see, is it an alternative for the gas from Russia? Can they rather go to Asia and then receive the same payment? This is quite complicated chart with all the pipelines, but the short story here is that only about 1/3 of the gas that is fed to Europe can change destination to Asia by 2030. And today, almost nothing. So this is really going to be a big loss for Russia. It's more easy for Russia to evacuate their oil. But for gas, Russia is likely to lose $40, $50, $60 billion every year. And with the gas prices today, much more than 100. But we don't expect these gas prices to remain. So we are talking about Russia losing 15%, maybe 20% of their total export income due to this situation. While for the oil side, they will more easily be able to circumvent Europe and get the oil directly to India or China and other countries that are willingly taking this oil. Okay, so in terms of total gas export from Russia. And this is such a sad situation because Russia had a very positive development. They had plans to use hydrogen into this. So if you move one slide forward, they had the Nord Stream 2 ready to be produced. So it was actually quite positive outlook for the income to Russia if they hadn't done this gigantic failure that they just did in Ukraine. And the intellectual people in Russia, they saw this, and of course, 99% of the people I've talked to, of course, is extremely disappointed and sad about the situation. So if you move on forward, we see that this was what it could have been. This is what is going to be. So we're talking about 4,000 BCM lost and $1 to $2 trillion lost income to Russia, in addition to all the other issues that they see. Okay, let's move another slide forward. And so the short-term effect will be that we have to be innovative, basically, just to get alternative sources of supply and very short-term demand destruction. But longer term, this event is clearly triggering the speed of the energy transition. So like you see here from Germany, they are tripling their ambitions in solar and doubling their ambitions in wind for the next 8 years. So, if you move on a slide forward, this is then the solution in terms of carbon dioxide emissions that is consistent with the IPCC budgets. And we try to see which of these tracks, and this is every decimal degree of global warming, is most likely. I think the solution space is here. It's between 1.4 degree global warming to 2.2 degrees global warming. And then we are looking at the technologies that could deliver this change. The solar PV is the most important. Number 2 is wind. Number 3 is the electric vehicle. And number 4 is the batteries. And batteries, not only for vehicles, but for be using to deal with the intermittency. And just to then get towards my conclusion here, that do we have to give up these climate ambitions due to the situation with Russia, and that we suddenly don't have need to reopen coal fields, etc.? Well, the most important driver is, as I said, the speed of deployment of solar. And working with the Chinese manufacturers of solar panels, we are seeing that they are actually increasing their capacities fast enough to deliver not on the 1.4 or the 1.5, but actually to the 1.6 degree ramp up that you see here. So still, I think it is realistic and reasons to believe that we are on track for 1.6 degrees in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. But there's an upside, which is the methane reduction that is not accounted for in the IPCC's budgets. So with that upside, we could actually land on a 1.5 degree scenario. And part of this ramping up of speed of deployment of solar is just happening now as a result of this situation in Europe, like you just saw for this example from Germany. So then to have the last slide now, to see this is the energy mix towards 2100 from 1965. So from the top, it is solar, and then wind, hydropower, geothermal, and biomass. And those 5 renewable sources are all much lower on the marginal operational cost. So meaning that when they are coming into the market, they will always push out fossil fuel. So in this way, coal, oil, and gas, the brownish colors here, will be outcompeted in the market. And solar and wind will be the key levers to do just that. And then my final slide, but with the same graphics, if you move on forward, is the same top line, primary energy. But you see that primary energy is actually declining. But still, the energy accessible to end users are increasing. And this is because fossil fuel have so much losses related to heat losses to the environment when you are burning fossil fuel to create work. and you don't have the same losses with renewable energy. So even with a growing population and increased GDP, we will be able to deliver on these climate targets now. So yeah, let me round off there, and happy to have a discussion or follow-up questions.
So as promised, all the data on energy sources you could possibly wish for. And you heard it, this will reduce Russian revenues from gas by $1 trillion on current form. Russian defense budget is around $70 billion, so that's 13, 14 years of a Russian defense budget. That's going to go away in this time horizon. And while we do this, we will be able to reach the 1.5 degree objective in the Paris Agreement. So some very good reasons to be optimistic from the energy independence side, I think, Jarand. Although the short-term picture looked demanding.
Yes, I think so. I think there will be a compromise here to avoid some of the short-term suffering, especially in the countries I mentioned. Even if you don't like those molecules, we, in one way, have to consume them.
Thank you. We'll change tack a little bit and go to the information space. So at least over the last half of this period that we call the post-Cold War, what we've seen is something else going on that we discussed a little bit in the prior panel, which is the weaponization of algorithms to manipulate our information stream as consumers. And we can go through a long list of potential consequences that has created. But I'd much rather hear about somebody who's made it their business to fix it. And Amelie, that is Factiverse. So tell us a little bit about your business, and then we can go into the wider perspectives afterwards.
Do you think I can stand there? Because
absolutely.
I'm gonna,
and you can also take this.
Unplug this one.
You can probably keep that. They can dial it down.
Okay.
I'll keep it here. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So, I have my notes. If you want the truth to go around the world, you must hire an express train to pull it. But if you want a lie to go around the world, it will fly. It is light as a feather, and a breath will carry it. That was said in 1855, and today it is still true. Although the situation is actually much worse, because lying is a business. It's a big business, and there are many people who are profiteering on that. Democracies crumble, stock market is volatile, and of course, there are, as we have seen with COVID-19, there are people who are actually getting sick and dying because of the spread of misinformation and also disinformation. And according to the Stanford Internet Observatory, the supply of disinformation is going to be soon infinite because of the algorithms, as Birger said as well, and the spread of it on social media. False information costs society quite a lot. They're difficult to find really good numbers for that. $78 billion, and that includes some of the health challenges, the bureaucracy challenges, and also the volatile stock market. And there are almost more than 1 in 2 people who are concerned, online news consumers, who are concerned whether what they read online is true or not. That's a study by Reuters Digital News Report with about 80,000 respondents. And this affects all of us, especially businesses, because how can you make decisions if you don't have all the facts, all the information you need to, in order to make decisions when it comes to investing, impacting the society, and just contributing to a more sustainable future. So at Factiverse, we believe that the opposite of lying is not necessarily the truth. Because what is the truth? That's not something algorithm can really show us, and we shouldn't rely on algorithms to do that. Yes, COVID vaccines are safe, but what you really want as a both decision maker and news consumer is to be able to understand what are the different sides to the story, what are the different opinions, so that you can make up your own mind instead of just following and living the life in the one filter bubble that you are exposed to by often social media. So we believe that, and we see that there is a huge trend that is developing. It's not about assessing what is true or false, but actually giving people a choice and empowering users to understand the different perspective. Is this article coming from a partisan website? Is it from a blog? What are the different agendas of the sources of the information, and which sources have in the past have been labeled as highly credible and which have been less credible. And I think that's also something that MIT studies show, that if you empower users to see the different sides of the story, they actually become less polarized because they understand. We want to understand, right? We don't want someone else to tell us this is how thing is, this is true and this is not. So we are aiming to become an industry standard in fact-checking and empower first and foremost journalists, analysts in finance sector and industries, and eventually consumers to see the different sides of the story. Our tech is built on AI and natural language processing, and we're careful what data we put in our AI to train, because we have a responsibility when we work with this topic. We are getting traction with some media conglomerates in the Nordics and the investment firms who are concerned about the greenwashing and false information about the climate. And we have quite a good team. My co-founder is Vinay Sethi. He's associate professor in machine learning here in the university in Stavanger. And I wish I could say that this topic is business, but it's not just business, it's personal for me. I was born in North Ossetia, which is a little republic in Russia, very close to Georgia and Armenia. And in the end of 90s, the politics in Russia started to change. Suddenly it was not the euphoria of the perestroika, but things were starting to get different. And my parents, who were entrepreneurs, both of them, lost absolutely everything. So one day, in 2000, I was in the Red Cross in Helsinki, saying words I thought I would never say. We are refugees and we're asking for asylum. So we applied for asylum in Finland. Mä puhun vähän suomea. Unfortunately.
Se on hyvä. Erittäin hyvä.
Kiitos. Well, unfortunately, the Finnish authorities did not think that we should stay in Finland, and after 6 months we were rejected and fled over the border to the north of Norway, where again applied for asylum. And being a refugee, basically a political refugee from Russia in the beginning of 2000 was not a cool thing to do. It was not possible in the Nordics. And I think the media was more concerned about the memes of President Putin in his bear back on a horse than actually putting in the different sides of the story. Norway rejected us as well. So I stayed in Norway for almost 7 years as undocumented, or as we call dreamer, here in the US. I was allowed to study at the university. I finished the university, and I decided I have to fix things my own way, because there was no help. And I wrote a book, which is called Illegally Norwegian, where I just put my face on the book. I came out and told my story. That led to quite a lot of attention in the Norwegian media in 2011, which led to me being deported out of Norway, because I was there in the country without any documents, although I had a strong connection. And what happened is that there was so many people who reacted, who were really, really angry with that I was deported. There was demonstrations. The Icelandic MPs and writers suggested that I should get a residency. There was a lot of attention all over the world. The Polish government tried to give me a residency as a persecuted writer. And the Norwegian Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg was not very happy with me. But luckily, because of so much attention and so much, basically, democracy in practice, I was allowed to return back to Norway. And in 3 months, the Stoltenberg went on for a compromise between the opposing parties, and a new law was introduced called Lex Amelie, which allows streamers to stay in Norway. One thing I learned through all this journey is that never take democracy for granted. When I was in Russia, when I was deported to Russia, and the journalists were looking at the demonstrations that were organized for me in Norway, they said, "Oh, that's so sweet, that's so naive to go and demonstrate for something you believe." I don't think so. I think that's one of the things you learn in the Nordic. That's an important value. We should take it with us. And I think the better our lives are, the easier it is to say, well, democracy is a nice thing. Just, we have it. Let's just, we don't need to work for it, which is not true. We have to work really, really hard. And I truly believe that's why to make informed decisions for democracy and for sustainable future, you need facts. You need to see the different sides of the story. Because after all, our future depends on it, and we don't know what's coming next. Thank you.
So that's a hard act to follow, Mårten. But I know you as an extremely deep thinker, and the question I was going to ask you was more technical around the state of cyber in the world, and how you see that evolve. But I'll actually just give you the floor to share your perspectives on what are the innovations we will need to make world safe for open democracies in the next decade or so.
Thank you, Birger, and thank you, everybody. My name is Mårten Mickos. I'm the CEO of HackerOne, a cybersecurity company. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I am there fully with my whole mind. I mean, absolutely in awe of what Maria just told us, and she is solving problems of human beings and society. I am a simple nerd. We solve problems with software that's insecure and software that has vulnerabilities. So much more limited scope of the job, and therefore more doable. So we'll talk about cybersecurity for a few minutes here and then engage in the conversation. When it comes to cybersecurity, the practice, the business, it is a I told you so industry. And what I mean is that whenever something bad happens in cybersecurity, it was always predicted a long time ago, always predicted by several experts. There's nothing terrible that has happened in cybersecurity that we who are in the industry didn't anticipate. That's a sad truth, that we can see how bad it will get, but we are just unable to get people and systems to put themselves in shape for the risks we are facing. And because of this, it's also true that the only sustainable improvement to cybersecurity is a preventative action. We tend to look at cyber breaches and digital attacks, and we see them in movies and in the media, and we think it's about facing the adversary when bad things happen. It's not at all true. To have any chance on cybersecurity, we have to take preventative action, boring action, long before the risk will happen. So in our field, there are surprises in cybersecurity, but it's only positive surprises. The only times we are surprised is when something actually works or somebody fixes something very quickly. But all the bad things happening have been anticipated for a long time. And now when we have a terrible situation in Ukraine, and as Jarand said, a gigantic failure by Russia, it causes indescribable pain and suffering for the Ukrainian people. So that in itself is just terrible. But as a side effect, it will also increase cyber attacks and cybercrime all over the world, and in ways that are broader than the actual war that is waged there. Because unfortunately, cybercrime behaves like armed conflict, meaning that the more there are angry young men, the more such attacks they are and the more damaging they are. And it's of course not just angry young men who are to blame, but the presence of resentment increases the danger enormously. And we will have resentment in the world now on any side of that war. We will have resentment in other countries. We have other countries who are sympathizing or antagonizing. We have China isolating itself today. So we have geopolitical changes that cause a lot of resentment among people who understand computers. And even if many or most of them have good, pure intent, some will be forced or feel justified to engage in cyber criminal behavior. So the story is that we know of all the risks. We know how ransomware, how to fight it. We know about stealing credentials, how to fight it. We know about DDoS attacks and how to fight them. All these techniques are known and the defense is known. We are now certain that the level of cyber attacks will increase. Maybe not this very day, because a lot of the energy and resources are used in the actual kinetic war, but over time, some of that, the conflict and resentment will spread into other parts and hit totally innocent organizations and countries. So we have some time to get our things in shape until it gets much worse, but it will get worse. There's no other future now than one with clearly increased cyber attacks and cybercrime and cyber incidents. So then we say, what should we do? Is there anything we can do? And the problem with cybersecurity is that most people are not experts on it. It's difficult to know how to defend yourself and build resistance to attack when you are not sure about how the technology actually works. So the whole list of advice to anybody is very long and it will be specific for any recipient, but there's some things we all should be doing. One is realize that it's preventative action we must take. So do something today, don't wait, don't postpone. Even a small thing today is much better than a panicked reaction tomorrow. A second thing is we must make cybersecurity a matter for everybody. We used to dreamingly think that we can have cybersecurity experts who take care of it for us. Not true. We need cybersecurity experts, and without them, we have no chance. But it must become a common initiative for all of us. You need to train every single employee of your organization in basic cyber hygiene, in basic cyber actions. And there is just one way to do cybersecurity, and it is together. That is the power we have that no adversary has, meaning we can band together, we can share information, we can share observations, we can share defense tools. We're already seeing it. It's not visible to the public eye, but going back to Ukraine, there's been a lot of attacks on various parts of the Ukrainian digital infrastructure, and nothing really, really bad has happened. Because months before the war started, they were getting help from other places, specifically from the US government and large American tech companies who went in there to assess and help and improve Ukraine and build the defenses for the coming onslaught, which they knew would come. So we're already showing that working together, we can solve any threat. But we have to keep doing it. And like I said, everybody has to take cybersecurity as their own priority, just like we all take responsibility in the COVID case. We must all wear a face mask. We must all wash our hands. Whatever we do, it's the experts will produce the vaccines and the medications, but every human being must be part of fighting the threat. And it's exactly the same with cyber threats and the cyber attacks we're facing. So that's how we just must do it. Today, if you operate a company and you don't have many cybersecurity experts, fortunately, the vendors can help you very, very well. If you run your applications and your digital assets on a public cloud vendor, they will support you and defend you better than anybody. And there are other major cybersecurity vendors who know how to deal with it, who can quickly step in and help. So the help is actually pretty near for anybody who is ready for it. And like I said, we have a little bit of time. So if we start now, we will be in much better shape. Another learning of cybersecurity is that we must see that as probabilistic risk management. There is no complete security or complete safety, never. We can only aspire to become a little bit better every single day. So we must think in probabilities. You can go to your security leader, if you have one, if you have a CISO, and say, what is the risk of major breach in the next 6 months for our organization? And the person should have an opinion. And you can go there tomorrow and say, and what is it now? And over some time, the risk should be going down because the organization is taking measures. But maybe the risk starts at 50% and then it sinks to 44%. Even that is a good improvement for any company. So those are our generic pieces of advice on what we can do. More broadly, our civilization is becoming digital and we are unequipped to deal with it. The old Vikings said, land skal med lag byggas, that you build your civilization with rules and laws. But we haven't done it for the digital side. We are building a whole new civilization that's digital, and we have been unable to determine how to ensure truth, facts, democracy, justice, rights, fairness, protection, safety, privacy. The laws and rules we have today are primitive compared to the advancement of technology. So we have to pass smart, modern laws that are made for the digital world, not the physical world. There we have a huge job for all of society to catch up with the civilization we're already entering. Our children are born into the digital world and we don't give them proper legal protection. So we need to stipulate the laws and the rules to make it work. And then we need to take control over technology and make it our servant, not our master. AI will help us solve many of these problems, but we need to make sure that AI, and as it is self-learning and developing itself, that it stays true to the moral and ethical principles that we decided. Because software is the ultimate expression of human intent, always. There is no software that does not represent human intent. And we must make sure that our intent is known by the software and heard by the software, so that even as it evolves and learns and optimizes and moves faster than we can think, the software will stay true to the founding principles, the intent that we had. It's very difficult. I don't know how to solve it technically. I'm also in no doubt about the possibility. We can solve it, and we need to solve it. So that's what I have to say, and I'll end here with noting that I've learned now in this cybersecurity space that if advice is really, really good, it is always boring. There is no exciting advice in cybersecurity, because if it is exciting, it's irrelevant. And if it is relevant, it is by definition boring. So if you ever get boring cybersecurity advice, think about it and consider that it might actually be the best advice you ever received. So thank you here from my little studio and back to everybody there, and happy to continue the conversation.
I think that's bad news. Well, I think that's bad news, Mårten, because I'm not sure you know how to be boring. But,
yeah, I know. I'm amazed that they accepted me to this company to run a cybersecurity company with this positive mindset. But we have, at HackerOne, if I may promote our company a little bit, we have delivered to our customers over 200,000 security vulnerabilities that they have fixed so far. So we have contributed quite a lot to the strengthening of our digital assets all over the world. But that's not the topic of the day, but you did bring it up, Birger, so I took the opportunity.
By all means. And so if I understand correctly, there's been some speculation about whether the feared Russian cyber capability was, how should you put it, inflated as the view of perhaps both the opponents and the Russian leadership itself of its own kinetic war capability. And that's why we haven't seen the massive cyber attacks. But I think you're saying that, well, no, actually, it's that we were very well prepared. We did all the boring stuff before things got really gnarly, and therefore we haven't seen these massive attacks that many people were speculating on. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. Like the capabilities of criminal or nation-sponsored groups in Russia is absolutely astonishing. Like they are so good that we have to be very, very worried. But let me also be clear, it's not just Russia. I agree that Russia is the #1 aggressor in the whole world right now, but it would be naive to think that they represent the totality of the threat. There's a threat landscape much broader with groups in other countries who are with Russia, against Russia, or have resentment for some other, or justification for some other reason. So it can be useful to look at Russia because it's such a stark example, but in the true assessment of risk, we have to look globally. And there are advanced persistent threat groups in many other countries that will soon be equally dangerous and like sophisticated as the Russian ones.
Thank you. So moving on to our fourth leg of the stool today, food security. I'd like to introduce Pekka Viljakainen, also known as the Bulldozer. I have it on good authority that was baptized by Steve Ballmer here in Seattle in 1996.
Correct, sir.
The governor asked us last night, as I think it was Ingvar Pettersson and Pekka, who was standing around the boat, are there any examples of tech entrepreneurs who have started investing in sustainable business? And of course, 3 hands went up. Pekka, why don't you tell us what you've been doing since you didn't quite retire, but refocused from being the tech enfant terrible of Finland and Tieto?
Yeah, thank you, Birger. Maria, first I need to say that I'm also a nerd. But like Birger, we are brothers, with Mårten, like Mårten, and Finnish nerds. But because Mårten was much more handsome and clever, he ended up to California. And I have been in 40 other countries doing businesses, so I have been in IT business all my life, and actually also being boring. But then about 11 years ago when I retired, and I was wondering 2 weeks what to do, because retirement as such is relatively boring, nothing to do, there is no management meetings, nothing. My wife started to kind of say that I should invent something. So I started investing companies, and I have so far invested about 30 companies. I don't look like an angel, but I'm kind of a business angel. And one of the most prominent one, I would say, well, we have done some exits, and that's my family thinks that I'm a genius already. But what I want to talk today is actually such an exciting and sexy story about fish. I'm sad that some of the friends from Reykjavik already left because this was targeted to them. Because I personally believe, and please record this date and this month and this year, that within 10 years, all traditional fish farming of the world will end. 1995, I said in the Redmond Microsoft campus that in 10 years, all the banking will be done in internet. Because I was programming with my tiny hands the world's first internet bank. And even Bill and Steve said that, not in America, my friend. Well, even my mother said to me in 1995 that nobody wants to use internet paying bills because they want to go to offices and meet other people. My mother is a lovely person, but she was wrong with that. Regarding fish, about 6 years ago, I was fooled to be an angel investor on the land-based fish farming technologies, where you have to solve the problem of this mission, having a super healthy food, no waste, no emissions, zero use of antibiotics, everything, energy coming from solar, wind, bioenergy, and industrial scale. Because as of today, the fish industry is €300 billion business. You can argue is it big or small, but I think it's big, even in the Finnish scale. Only less than 1% of it, less than 1% of fishing and fish farming is done in a sustainable way. So if you check any industry of the world, I mean, if food industry or any industry, you cannot find industry which has not been disrupted at all, but fish is. Because the big fish producers of the world are hanging tough, they want to stop the development. It's like 5 years ago when in Las Vegas, the chairman of Mercedes-Benz said that the coming decade is the decade of diesel engines. Same happens in fish as of today while we speak. So what we have done actually, first of all, we were suffering a lot. I promised to my wife 5 years ago that, honey, I give 2 million euros and 2 years of my time to solve the problem. So far I have put 5 years and 25 million euros. We are still married, and she's okay. I mean, this is normal kind of family talks. But there are kind of a three cornerstone. Everything starts from the genetics and selective breeding. So we have to really have a healthy fish which survives without any medication. Secondly, you need, sorry for my English, shitload of software to analyze the animal health, to analyze the process, to own the whole story. And then last but not least, you have to educate the world to eat fresh fish. Because there are more single households than ever before. People don't want to buy a whole fish. Young people, teenagers, they're a little bit, fish is not so cool. So we have to solve all three problems. And to make it happen, it was stolen with pride from Elon Musk, an idea of gigafactories. And we built the first gigafactory in Finland, and we are now holding the world record on efficiency of growing millions of fish without any medication, everything done under one roof. And there are consumer products are leaving from this small door on the right side, about 170,000 fish fillet per day. Just to understand the scale, this is 4 times the football arena, the size of it. And I am standing there on the right, flying the drone, taking the photo. I'm like a fly there. This is what we are doing, and I personally believe, and I repeat myself, and then we can talk some other stuff. The whole world, including United States, has to guarantee the food safety, secure the food supply of ultra-fresh, healthy products with the 0 emissions. And some might say that it's not possible. I say it's definitely possible, and you can come to Finland and see how it works. And soon such gigafactories will be built around the world. That's what we are doing, because retired, boring people like myself have to do something to do, for the rest of the life. Thank you.
So in a sense, more good news, Pekka. We can solve at least long-term food security with reduced emissions. Mm-hmm. You had another career too, and I wanted to get into that because short-term, there are many people who believe that wars get won by logistics, not strategy. But in the long-term geopolitical conflict, and I think it's been observed about the decline of the original Soviet Union that this was a problem, because conflict of that nature is won by innovation. Mm-hmm. So whichever society is producing more of it will have the upper hand in the long run. You were the chief advisor to the Russian government on innovation until what date?
December.
Right. And you were a board member of
the Skolkovo project.
Of Skolkovo and the Postbank in Russia until February 24th.
Correct.
All right. So suffice it to say you have some background to know what you're talking about. Who's got the better innovative ecosystem and capability?
Yeah, so like so many times before, when United States and Russia wants to do something together, like 11 years ago, US and Russia decided to make a joint innovation project. They need somebody to be in the middle. And so many times it has come from Finland. And I had just retired, and I don't know how they randomly selected, because there was joint friends from Google boss and from Intel was and in the US side, and then Russian side. So they called to me that we need totally independent person who is not Russian, who is not American, but who can be in the middle watching innovation purely from the business standpoint. And I didn't know anything about Russia, honestly speaking. Not a single word of Russian language and nothing. And I went to Moscow. I thought that we are negotiating, but there was already an order said that do it. And I said, this is kind of interesting. There was both American and Russian parties saying that you are being appointed. Good luck. So I have been in 110 Russian cities in the past 11 years in 10 time zones, so I know something about the country. I've been working with the young people, 20, 30 years old young entrepreneurs, university students, professors, in the area of innovations. And of course, everything what has happened now, it's such a heartbreaking thing, because millions of those people with whom I've been working, I can say millions because it's a really large group, they have kind of lost their future, so to say. So there is absolutely nothing positive to say about the current development. Having said that, it's absolutely true that one day this era of Cold War will change, and then there is another, how do you reborn things? And then you need that generation, and you need those innovators, and you need those people, which have actually now, most of them have escaped from Russia. They are now like in neighbors of Mårten in Silicon Valley, or they are in Seattle, or they are in Dubai, or wherever they are. But this generation is definitely needed by any country to reborn. And innovations are definitely needed, but as of now, it's basically impossible to operate at all. I mean, totally. I have also been very instrumental in the collaboration with MIT here. So I've been an advisor for MIT, building the joint university education exchange programs, which are now, of course, all been frozen since February. But it's a really sad, not only because of Russia, but it's also sad from the Europe standpoint, because we need talent to be able to exchange ideas. And there is no doubt that there is a great knowledge about not only hacker technologies, but the real heavy software and other technologies, what should benefit the world in general, so to say, I mean, globally. So, but currently the situation is totally frozen, and I, of course, sincerely hope that it would be solved as quickly as possible and there would be peace, but I would say nothing positive in the horizon as of today, unfortunately.
On that note, I'm actually going to look to you, who's been listening to these 4 fantastic stories, to hear if there are any questions that you'd like to ask 4 very different but very impactful innovators with Nordic links. See a hand back there? Could you take a mic, because otherwise the folks watching remotely can't hear the question.
Oh, this is for Mårten. Mårten, you said that Russia had pretty strong cyber attack abilities. What about their own defenses? And are you seeing that happen at all, where there's been maybe a banding together of some of these hackers to play a little quid pro quo with Russia? Does that make sense?
Did you pick up the question, Mårten?
Yeah, that's a great question. You could there is offensive hacking and defensive hacking, and offensive is trying to break somebody else's system, and defensive is you try to improve a system. My company is engaged only in defensive hacking, and we don't think there's anything that makes the world a better place other than strengthening the software we have. We understand that when there is a war, any action or any methods will be tried out, and therefore it's understandable that there's offensive hacking and it can give either party a benefit. There's no doubt about it. But in the more generic sense, it does not make the world a better place. It may help determine the outcome of a war or a conflict. So therefore, my company and me, we are not at all engaged in any of that. We are more like the Red Cross, that we are servicing any patients and striving for health rather than lack of health of software and not lack of health. But you're right, there are offensive hacking initiatives, and there have been reports on them having been very successful in some cases. But even that is a risk for everybody, because it reminds us how vulnerable we are. So if you think about the long-term effects, it means that if offensive hacking is possible, then it could be possible for somebody to offensively hack you. So my recommendation remains, we should strengthen our own digital assets and make them as resistant to digital attack as possible.
Mårten, can I comment this?
By all means.
This hacking issue is, the security issue is very important, and I just need to tell you my view on it, because I have a totally normal mobile phone. I'm not the normal guy, because I have basically unlimited technical resources, because I'm a nerd and I used to have 20,000 nerds. If I ask them to help me, I mean all over the Europe and USA, they help me. I just want to tell you that I have had the same mobile phone number since '94. It's the shortest phone number in the planet. And there has been hacking attempts to the phone from about 55 countries in past 12 months. I mean, thousands of those. I'm not playing down to Russia at all, because a lot of those are coming from Russia, but I'm saying that many nations and many people would like to know what is happening in my mobile phone. And I have taken a role of the security already in the 90s, and Mårten knows it very well. I said it in one public event in Las Vegas, that if everything what is in my digital device, mobile phones or laptop, would be published tomorrow on internet or on Financial Times, all the images, all the swimsuit images, everything, all the documents, all the transactions, even in the worst scenario, that would be just embarrassing. And that's the way, I know that the countries and nations cannot do it. If you have patient records or hospital or military, you have to be absolutely certain. But I'm saying is that traveling, connecting with the Wi-Fi's, tomorrow in Chicago, next day in London, connecting, it's such a battle, the whole security stuff, that you have to make your way of living in the say that you are in a relatively transparent world, whatever you do. And then when I don't want to be transparent, I just shut it off and I go to my island, take two bottles of beer and went to sauna. Then I'm there. I mean, that's the only way to be. And even in the sauna, I don't know if there is some sensors there. But
yours? Yeah.
Probably.
So now I must step in, because Pekka always gives good reason for debate.
And he has, and Mårten, you have been in a sauna. That's why he wants to comment this.
It is true that many of us can say, if my data is exposed, it's only embarrassment. But it's a failure of society, because all you have to be is a dissident, an underrepresented minority or something else, and you cannot afford that. So when we talk about privacy, it is to protect those who have no other protection, and not to protect those who can afford the exposure. So we must take privacy very, very seriously, no matter how ready many of us would be to share our information, because some just absolutely cannot, and their lives will be at danger.
Very good. Any more questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. First, thanks for a very stimulating session. I think it's noticeable that all of the panelists have some substantial experience, if I can use that term, with Russia. And we've heard this morning that there are going to be some very dramatic changes, not only to Europe, but to Russia. $1 trillion loss to an economy is a rather significant event. So it seems very unlikely that there will be no response to this loss of $1 trillion. Since all of you have some experience with Russia, I'd be very interested in any of your views on what a likely response will be, particularly from Russia.
I'm going to be a little clever here, and because I saw your hand, Jay, so I'm going to ask you to ask your question and perhaps make the first commentary on this statement. It strikes me you have perhaps an equally good background to answer.
Well, I know, Birger, you're pointing to my background as a former American diplomat, but my question was on energy, and it was to Mr. Rystad, but it was more on the climate change aspect. I was curious, when you talked about the 1.5 degree Celsius, where you thought that we would get, the slide you were showing was Europe-based, but I'm assuming that your assumption is that that's global. So I wanted to ask that question, but to respond to my colleague who's the board member here, obviously $1 trillion, or it was between 1 and 2 trillion over a course of a number of years, I know. But given the size of the Russian economy, which is large, but I think only a tenth the size of the U.S. economy, $1 trillion in the U.S. context is massive. And so you just kind of multiply that by 10, and you can, if we were to lose 10 or 20 trillion dollars over the course of a number of years in the United States, can imagine how devastating that would be. I know that is, if it does turn out to be that way, this is, as you all have suggested, just devastating for the Russian economy and for the people who, like Pekka, has been working with, and their livelihoods going forward. Yeah.
We'll take one more question, and then we'll turn it back to the panel for closing comments.
Isn't it the price of diplomacy, this $1 trillion as well?
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you fix the relationship between Russia and the world, there's a lot to gain for everyone, I think. There's almost, you can put a price tag on the diplomatic, on the diplomats who can fix this.
How's that for a task for your profession, Jay? Got a question, Lars? Yes, please.
Yeah, Birger, I am not in the high-tech industry, as I am having a company that is construction and real estate investment. And we talked about sort of the dependence of energy from Russia and so forth, and the problem that creates, but also the effect that it will have on CO2 emission if we cannot complete sort of the goals for the for going to a green economy. And one thing that wasn't mentioned, the need for energy, is there is also a way to get around it by saving on energy. And I just want to mention that we here in Seattle have a company in Sweden that is a leader in Sweden when it comes to reducing the pollution coming and the energy used in real estate, as we are one of the major developers of apartment buildings in Sweden, where we have introduced new technologies, even if we are a very conservative industry. And that is, we have a concept of self-heating houses, where we reduce significantly the need for heating. And we also have, in cooperation with the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, developed a way to reduce the need of cement in making concrete, which basically reduced the need of cement with about 20% by mixing in agricultural products, or rather waste from the agricultural industry into the cement. And that is something that is reducing the need for cement with about 20%. And we have just started building the first real project with this new kind of cement. And so there is a lot to be done also on reducing the need for energy and CO2 emission. So, and there we have something going on here between Seattle and Sweden at this point in time, but which I'm sure will be expanded also to the other Nordic countries. So we are really looking forward to see the governor coming to the Nordic countries here this fall and showing what we can really do that can be sort of implemented here in the US too. So that was not a question. There might be room for another.
Thank you, Lars. It's a very inspiring example, though. So with that, just go the same order around the panels. Jarand, perhaps you could start up again with a 15 to 20-second summary of what you've taken out of this.
Thank you. Just to clarify, my last 4 slides was global slides, and there were when I was showing the global energy production, and also indicating what you indicated, the last person asking question here. We see a peak energy demand that are quite soon due to energy efficiency. So basically every building will be much less energy requirement, and even at some point a net producer. All the new industrial sites that are built are needing much less energy. And also we have all this innovation even in Sweden, where we are, for example, producing carbon dioxide free steel, using hydrogen with SSAB. So it was actually absolutely valid for the global picture, this 1.5 degree reasoning that I had. That on the carbon dioxide side, it was 1.7, but then with methane reduction. And linking into Pekka, the food sector will be 80% of emissions after 2050. So reducing emissions from the food sector is critical. And rice cultivation and cattle is the biggest source of emissions, actually. So artificial meat is also one solution. So maybe you can bring fish farming further to artificial fish. I don't know, question mark. So a few comments from my side.
And thank you for dialing in. No, it's getting late there. So, Maria.
Well, follow Factiverse, that's for one. And for the other, I think there's been a lot of focus on misinformation coming from Russia. I think misinformation is coming from both sides. So be careful what you're sharing. There are actually quite a lot of, even just the code I was searching for this, it was attributed to 5 different leaders, world leaders, and none of it was true. So it is actually much closer than you think.
Thank you. Mårten?
So I'm always delighted to be at these events because the Nordic Museum somehow captures a Nordic spirit that's better than we have in the Nordics. and when we think about what will make the world better, I think we should take that spirit and distill it to what you have here. Like people who believe in the rule of law, people who believe in honesty and transparency, people who respect every other human being, irrespective of origin, and people with a lot of curiosity about science and technology. And there's something very potent there that is much broader than Nordic. Anybody can be part of it, but I find that the Nordic Museum somehow is capturing that very unique spirit, and that gives hope for any problem we need to solve.
Thank you.
Okay.
Pekka?
Yeah, I want to summarize the Nordic philosophy with a few sentences. We all have to work for true circular economy and sustainability. We cannot forget it. That's point number 1. And point number 2, which is as important, make love, not war. Thank you. Spasibo.
Okay. Thank you very much.